Hello everybody, today we are off to the seaside for our story. It's The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch. It is a classic. I know I say that about loads of books, but look, this one even says the children's classic on it, so it's definitely a classic. Right, The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch is by Rhonda and David Armitage. I wonder what's going to happen to this lighthouse keeper. Let's find out. The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch. This book is very well loved, so some of the pages are a little bit wonky. It's a very old book of mine. The Lighthouse Keeper's Lunch by Rhonda and David Armitage. Once there was a lighthouse keeper called Mr. Grinling. At night time, he lived in a small white cottage perched high on the cliffs. In the daytime, he rowed out to his lighthouse on the rocks to clean and polish the light. Mr. Grinling was a most industrious lighthouse keeper. Come rain or shine, he tended his light. Sometimes at night, as Mr. Grinling lay sleeping in his warm bed, the ships would toot to tell him that his light was shining brightly and clearly out to sea. Really important job. Each morning, while Mr. Grinling polished the light, Mrs. Grinling worked in the kitchen of the little white cottage on the cliffs, concocting a delicious lunch for him. Once she had prepared the lunch, she packed it into a special basket and clipped it onto the wire that ran from the little white cottage to the lighthouse on the rocks. But one Monday, something terrible happened. Mrs. Grinling had prepared a particularly appetizing lunch. She had made a mixed seafood salad, a lighthouse sandwich, cold chicken garni, sausages and crisps, peach surprise, iced sea biscuits, drinks and assorted fruit. That reminds me a bit of the Hungry Caterpillar, you know, the page with all the pictures. She put the lunch in the basket and, as usual, sent it down the wire. But the lunch did not arrive. It was spotted by 3 scavenging seagulls who set upon it and devoured it with great gusto. "Clear off, you varmints!" shouted Mr. Grinling, but the seagulls took not the slightest notice. "This is an excellent peach surprise, boys. She's a great cook, Fred. Scrumptious lunch, Tom." Very nice. That evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling decided on a plan to baffle the seagulls. "Tomorrow I shall tie the napkin to the basket," said Mrs. Grinling. "Of course, my dear," said Mr. Grinling. "Sounds like a good plan." Right, that does look like a good plan. Let's hope. Oh no. "They'll have to try harder than this to stop us, Bert." They are pesky seagulls. On Tuesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains for another plan. "They are a brazen lot, those seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "Brazen indeed," said Mr. Grinling. "What shall we do?" "Our cat does not appear to like seagulls," said Mrs. Grinling. "No, my dear," said Mr. Grinling. "Hamish is an accomplished seagull chaser." "Of course," exclaimed Mrs. Grinling. "Tomorrow Hamish can guard the lunch." "A most ingenious plan," said Mr. Grinling. Hamish did not think that the plan was ingenious at all. He spat and hissed as Mrs. Grinling secured him in the basket. There, Hamish," said Mrs. Grinling consolingly. "I'll have a tasty piece of herring waiting for you when you arrive home." Poor Hamish. Oh! Sadly, Flying did not agree with Hamish. His fur stood on end when the basket swayed, and his whiskers drooped when he peered down at the wet blue sea, and he felt much too sick even to notice the seagulls, let alone scare them away from the lunch. Pretty pussy like a piece of lobster mornay. Fancy lunch. This food gets better every day, Fred. Aren't you going to chase us, pussy? I don't think Hamish is in the mood for chasing. No. Oh, lackaday, lackaday, said Mr. Grinling sadly. Meow, meow, said Hamish pitifully. Oh, yes, he's looking very miserable. On Wednesday evening, Mr. and Mrs. Grinling racked their brains again for a new plan. What shall we do? Said Mr. Grinling. Mrs. Grinling looked thoughtful. I have it, she exclaimed. Just the mixture for hungry seagulls. Indeed, my dear, said Mr. Grinling. What have you in mind? Wait and see, said Mrs. Grinling. Just wait and see. She's a clever lady, that Mrs. Grinling. She's got a lot of good plans. Mustard sandwiches, shuffled Mr. Grinling. A truly superb plan, my dear, truly superb. Have you ever eaten mustard? It's very spicy hot. Very spicy. Some of it is. That looks, well, that's extra strong, so that will be. On Thursday morning, Mrs. Grinling carefully packed the mustard sandwiches and sent them off down the wire to the expectant seagulls. I particularly like Hamish's face on this page. Don't know why. Here we go, they're eating. Oh, yuck! Ack! Ugh! They do not like those mustard sandwiches. On Friday, Mrs. Grinling repeated the mustard mixture. All right, boys, let's go and have lunch somewhere elsewhere. It's the same as yesterday's lunch, Fred. So, on Saturday, up in the little white cottage on the cliffs, a jubilant Mrs. Grinling put away the mustard pot before she prepared a scrumptious lunch for Mr. Grinling. While he waited for his lunch down in the lighthouse on the rocks, Mr. Grinling sang snatches of old sea shanties as he surveyed the coastline through his telescope. And this is what he saw. No mustard in this lot, Tom. We'll fly back here for lunch again tomorrow, boys. This is a delicious chocolate eclair, Fred. Ah, well, such is life, mused Mr. Grinling as he sat down to enjoy a leisurely lunch in the warm sunshine. Here we go. All thanks to the clever plan from his clever wife. All right, thank you. I have another story that is about Mr. Grinling and Mrs. Grinling, and that is coming up for you on Friday. So you can look forward to that, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.